Welcome to Straight Talk Soundboard, which is both a sounding board where senior technology executives can try out ideas and share their professional insights with industry peers, but also a soundboard which amplifies those ideas and insights to a broader audience. I'm Paul Hemp, the editor-in-chief of Straight Talk, and we're fortunate to have with us today three very senior technology executives who are going to talk about how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted their businesses and ways in which they have successfully responded to it. Let me take a minute to introduce the three of them. Our first guest is Mark Stone, who is the CIO of the Texas A&M University System, which comprises not only the 11 Texas A&M campuses around the state, but also 8 independent state agencies, including the Texas Department of Emergency Management, which has coordinated the state's response to the pandemic. Our second guest is Patrick Kamm, Vice President for Technology Operations and Global Management at IGT, the international gaming company, which provides the technology, builds the equipment, and in many cases runs everything from casino gaming to state lotteries to online betting. Our third guest is Ghalib Kassam, who is Chief Information Officer of the Pulitzer Prize-winning Los Angeles Times. Recently, in the period leading up to the pandemic and during it, the LA Times has been in the process of merging with its regional rival, the San Diego Union Tribune, which has meant the technology integration of these two news organizations. So I thought we'd start off with a question about the moment at which it became clear that COVID-19 was going to completely change the way we all conducted business. The aha moment, if you will, when our panelists realized that everything had changed. Mark, let's start with you. What's been your experience over the last 6 to 8 months?
So my role is to oversee all 20 members of the A&M system, 20 CIOs, and so my breadth is a lot larger than just universities. For our 11 universities within the system, it was the aha moment when we were told, due to what the state wanted us to do, we sent all of our students home literally upon arrival calendar about 3 days after they returned from spring break. We then sent all of our students, for all practical purposes, home into online. Everything dates from that event, and all of the scrambling the 11 universities had to do, all of the state agencies, which are essential government operations that we had to oversee, also had to immediately adjust. So that was our aha moment when we sent everyone home.
Were you anticipating that before it happened?
I would love to sit there and say that we were anticipating it. We were not blind because we had seen data coming up, but the rapidity with which we just shut everything down did catch all of us slightly off guard. We had about a 1 week period of time that's when the aha moment came, and we adjusted pretty quickly. We just didn't think that we would go to that dire of a response. So yeah, we were caught a little bit off guard, I think, to be very transparent.
So Ghalib and Patrick, why don't you talk about moments at which you saw your own world was going to change, and then what your challenges were in because of that.
You know, our response was very early on. The impact was very early on. We have a large 400-person engineering center in China, the epicenter essentially. You know, the lockdown in China, you know, the way it was handled over there wasn't government sponsored necessarily initially. We had to take the bull by the horns and initiate a work from home policy for the safety of our own employees, which presented almost immediately challenges with respect to bandwidth, security, etc. Specifically, you know, our IP in China is always top on our list. In the gaming environment, there are also requirements in some cases for quality organizations to be able to touch large profile machines, and that presented a challenge for us as well, where we had to break down the machines to its core components and able to get these things to people's homes. We had to make a lot of allowances, again, with respect to IP in that space. But I think communication, consistent communication worldwide was a challenge. You've got different cultures, different maturity in terms of how the virus was spreading. So messaging for one environment, for instance, in the Far East, was further along than what you would communicate, for instance, here in the United States, where the virus hadn't yet been impacted. Getting consistent messaging across all of the verticals and the different types of customers that we had was a challenge. So as a chief of staff and having a portfolio that spans all of the verticals, I had this really interesting perspective on what was happening worldwide, but also across our very diverse customer base. So it was very interesting to get into the meetings and start talking about a communication plan, not just externally, but also internally with our employees to keep them up to speed on what the company was doing for their benefit, as well as why we were making certain decisions from a business perspective. So lots and lots of lessons learned, but our aha certainly was when this whole thing started in China.
You said the communication planning wasn't maybe that good. What sort of takeaways do you have that were useful to your organization, but also that might be useful to other organizations facing a kind of a cataclysmic both technology and cultural change within the organization?
All of us in technology, we think a lot about business continuity and business recovery and all of that. So from a technology perspective, did we learn a lot of things about, widespread work from home and the need for, additional bandwidth and security and, just those little challenges, I think. I think there's a lot of takeaways. Nobody would typically have foreseen such an event, such a pandemic on a worldwide basis. So that's fine. I don't see anything earth-shattering there. But nobody, I don't think a lot of people, when they think business continuity and business recovery, think about the communication plan internally across, a company that may have a worldwide footprint. They don't necessarily have a plan in place to think, about worldwide communication instantaneously across a situation where you've got a different maturity level in terms of how this virus spread. It was very unique. I think it is very unique. And I think, the after action review that we have is we now have a template on how we would do this in the future. Should there be a second wave, or even, if this should happen again? Who's to say? My thing is communication and keeping everybody up to speed was a greater challenge for us than technology. I think it was, a hiccup. We recovered very quickly, again, from technology. I'm not talking about business. But to me, where we lacked and weren't as quick to respond properly was communication.
Mark, any thoughts on the communication aspect throughout an organization, both for informational purposes, but also kind of for morale purposes?
Yeah, I was to say the issue of informational purposes did not prove for us to be a challenge. But truthfully, for morale purposes, that was a real challenge for us. And part of it is unlike the LA Times, where a large portion of the staff were used to working remotely. Most of our staff, due to long-held, incorrectly believed premise, we didn't have a lot of people working remotely. Everyone around said you just can't do that. So as a result, when we pushed the 99% of the people who had never worked remotely to working remotely, we found out very quickly we had to communicate to them because they had lost that connection. And so we had to battle with morale. We had to battle with people not feeling in touch. And so all of our communication, literally within about 7 to 10 days, we went in a massive change management effort where we started setting up regular means of communicating and trying to bring people back in to where they sensed that they were a part of their original mission, which they did not feel for about a week or two. So that's where we battled our communication. And we did a very effective job, but it was a little bit of a caught us off guard for a couple of weeks. And so we saw literally within 30 days this huge pivot to where we got as many questions about when can I come back as do I have to ever come back?
Right.
And so that even created a culture change for us, and we had to begin navigating that.
I wonder how the whole world is going to be changing right now with the work from home. I mean, here at IGT, we've demonstrated that we can do it. We've demonstrated we could deliver the most complex systems almost virtually, remotely, aside from the few engineers in infrastructure that need to go set up the hardware. Almost everything else can be done remotely. And it is a bit of a culture shock for customers. These large-scale conversions that we do for casinos or lotteries, happen in the lottery business very infrequently, sometimes once every 15 to 20 years. And when you're talking about billion-dollar systems, that are pushing transactions, hundreds of thousands of transactions a minute through them, it is a very stressful time for them. And that we're doing it now remotely and not there holding their hands. There's something to be said for having somebody sitting right next to you and reassuring you all the time what's going on. To think that this is all happening remotely, and of course, as a customer who is not a technologist, not really understanding that there are hundreds of people working around the world, around the clock on your projects, and just putting it in the hands of this third party to convert your billion-dollar business is very interesting. That aside, I'm just wondering now that we've demonstrated in this business that we can work from home, I wonder what's going to happen with, all of the other industries out there working from home, how it's going to impact the real estate market for those type, CBRE and others that have these types of facilities. In some cities, you hear that they're building, and others, everybody's moving out. And, everybody, even here at IGT, I'm on a number of committees, and we're looking at decreasing our footprints, right?
From our vantage point, we are already looking at how do we actually reduce our footprint. We've proven, as the rest of you have, we can in fact continue to get the paper out every single day. That's never been an issue. And to our end consumer, they don't know the difference. They didn't know whether we did this from a building or a house or an office or anything. That's the quality of the content continues to go up. And occupying less real estate. So really, fundamentally, your OpEx is going to go down from a business standpoint. The commercial space is going to become a glut in most all the major metropolitan areas. And people are going to start looking at what is the best quality of life now for us as a family. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought was kind of interesting for me, in the 4 months that we've been away from the office, plus or minus, I have yet to get one request for a printer. I had functional printers all over the place, in every single building. And I used to calls to say, oh my God, I got to have a printer in my office. I print so much, and I just, walking across the hall to get this other thing. And myself, I've got all these leases with Xerox and HP and, Epson. I'm just going to kill them all. It makes no sense. And I have yet to hear from one solitary person that's crying for a printer.
If it is cheaper for people to work at home, does that change a company's, profit and loss statement or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to think about two things, right? If you've got assets on your balance sheet that are owned, you've got a different problem to solve.
I had made a note to say that we haven't talked about the increased productivity working from home. It's more the inverse is what people were initially talking about. I've said in a number of meetings that I find I'm in front of my desk now from 7 a.m. to easily 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And the same holds true for my engineering crews across the world. It's not difficult at IGT culturally to monitor is too strong a term, and it's got bad, a bad vibe to it. But we are such a management by metrics type of technology organization, whether it's, lines of code, DRE, making a drop on time, so many different ways to confirm that work is getting done. That was never really a concern. My feeling is that the work output has increased despite all of the distractions at home.
I think you're absolutely right. I was just going to add to exactly what you just said. I mean, just the travel in LA, I'm about 14, 16 miles from work, and it takes me a solid hour and a half.
Wow.
If I leave the house, if I get out of my driveway at 7, there's a very good chance that I can, in fact, get to my office, be at my desk by 8 on a good day. And if, for whatever reason, I miss it by 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or, God forbid, there's an accident, it's a 9 o'clock maybe show up. All of that has gone away, and to both you guys' point, I mean, fundamentally putting in significantly more hours. I'm in front of Zoom 8 of the 10 hours of the given day that I'm working. And I find myself, one of the things I've tried to do is virtual happy hour, just to get the team together, everybody grab something to drink, grab a snack, just to let the hair down at least once a week, maybe twice, and once every other week. But I'm also finding myself strongly encouraging people to find work-life balance. Spend some time away from the desk, take some time.
Talk a little bit about looking over out on the horizon, unrelated or possibly related to the new world. But what sort of technology, ambitious sort of projects do you have, or challenges that you see?
Where I think our 3 major technology changes are pretty straightforward. Because we have moved to this remote model, because we're moving more of our employees over time to working from home, we've got to solve the endpoint cybersecurity or endpoint monitoring. I have to have that capability. Very quickly related to that is what I'll call air gap backups. We have to ensure that all critical data that is subject to being phished, particularly since we have so many state agencies and we support many counties and municipalities, we've got to move to where when someone is successfully phished, because that's what will happen, that they can recover in less than 24 hours because they have a backup that has also not been bricked. So we are pushing really hard in the next 12 to 18 months to make all of the critical databases across the state and across the system so protected from a successful phishing attack, because we can't stop employees from doing stupid things and clicking on links. So that is a huge effort for us across the state here, is to solidify and make them protected from being the backups from being bricked.
Is the technology available to do those
Yes.
2 things? It's just a matter of either
Time and money
or implementing. Yeah. Okay.
Time and money. It's there. It's just time and money. And then really the last thing that we're really pushing on, and you can kind of imagine, is as we move to a distributed basis, technologically, how do we start providing shared services to a remote workforce versus one that's centralized? And now putting in very more effective shared services where people can get the assistance they need even if they're not physically present.
And what's an example of that?
So what we would very quickly be able to do is to have a more astute group of people who can provide desktop support like issues, who are familiar with, we'll just say, if we got 50,000 employees within the system, to navigate to say, hey, how are you going to fix your problem at home when I'm not physically there? Because walking them through that process requires a different set of skills than what typically you might have in person.
And does that mean some new types of people on your team, or you're saying educating the?
Both. I think what you'll do is over time, you'll educate what you have, but over time you might even actually acquire a different set of skills, because these are people who would be more gifted in being able to see things remotely versus having to do things with your hands. So yes.
Ghalib, what's on your agenda?
Sorry, one real quick comment to Mark's. I think the other thing that we're also looking at is bots and some sort of self-help for those types of people that are in fact remote and remote, desk site touch is not available. Is really how can they do a lot of self-help and some sort of automated AI type functionality at the endpoint. Because there are tools that are out there and they will mature over time because that whole market is going to have to start looking for new products to sell. Just a point. Yeah.
Patrick, what do you see on the horizon, and what sort of challenges do you see to addressing some of those things on your agenda?
In our space, I think that the challenges for our internal staff are no different than what we've already talked about, from phishing to the bots. For example, that was an early conversation when our new CIO took over. Making people more responsible for troubleshooting, the issues that they might run into. In terms of the security, bandwidth, tools, I think we were already mature. I think we've matured more in a very short period of time, and we're operating very well in terms of the work from home, productivity, quality, et cetera. So we're not seeing a lot of issues at this point. And I think that we could continue to sustain where we are, our operational tempo, and continue to mature, how we operate on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the product suite, what we're really looking at now is how to respond to the marketplace, cashless solutions in casinos, online solutions for the purchase of multi-state tickets, Keno, as the sporting events come back online, working with jurisdictions, legislature to legalize sports betting. Probably the most evident that anybody would see if they frequented casinos, which I don't, would be all of the cashless solutions that we've got out there. The remote wallet, it's a matter of, our solution, the industry solution, but we were already doing this and had already rolled it out in a few casinos in Vegas. Is you've got a remote wallet on your phone, and when you enter the property, you're automatically logged into your loyalty program. Of course, you've already done all of the links and everything, registration prior to, but now you don't need to really touch the machines. It's an interesting way to be entertained, because you almost don't even need to be in the casino. You just need to be in the vicinity of a machine, and you can do everything on your phone if you wanted to. And then we have front of house types of things with the hotels as well that are all touchless at this point. Physical barriers between machines at casinos, automated cleaning solutions, whether it's a light that cleans any surfaces to a beacon that just sends out a alert to a staff member to clean a machine. So we're in that space, but very much around cashless types of solutions in the product roadmap right now.
I just would go around and have you make one prediction about how is your professional life or job, not description, but job, what you actually do, going to change in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think the work from home is here to stay. I don't see the need to be in the office. Granted, I think there are efficiencies and benefits to a team environment. Certainly engineering teams, development teams that are working together. But there are so many tools now and for the last few months, the work from home has been mandated, that people are getting more comfortable working in a team environment online. They're very interactive tools out there. They don't replace sitting in a room and doing a sticky note exercise or anything like that, or looking over a cubicle to ask a question to your colleague. But, I really think that the increased work hours, from my perspective, that I see, the ability to manage my metrics remotely and not have to look over people's shoulders, and the direct and indirect cost savings from an OpEx perspective that you're going to see is going to continue down, is going to continue to support that. It may be just a generation, and we may flip back to, we may see an increase in brick and mortar and an increase in travel as things, as this whole thing progresses, and as I think Mark said, as the virus just dies down on its own, absent a vaccine that really is the be all end all. I think that at least for the next couple of years, we'll be, at least in my industry, doing a lot of work from home, and we're changing the industry customer perception and expectations that were there in front of them as well. From a product perspective, it's all about cashless and online.
Ghalib, say what you think, how you think your, let's say you get through all your transitional stuff. What might be a big moonshot for you in your business?
I think from a organizational standpoint, the whole concept of people working from home in different homes, more widespread homes, more geographically dispersed around the United States. I think if this continues down that path, I would expect that a lot of my users may actually be global. And so really, how am I managing a different footprint, a wider footprint, a culturally different footprint, a language potential barrier as this thing continues to spread? Because we, by the nature of having a business, brought everybody together under one roof in a physical geographic spot. And rent is challenging. Want to get closer to home, go back to the roots, where they grew up, where they were born, what have you. I think in the foreseeable future, I think that the issues potentially, or the challenges, or the benefits of working that far afield, I think will be some of the things to be working on next. Is how do you manage the bandwidth issues, the cultural issues, the language barriers, customs, traditions, those stuff. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Simply put, the marketplace doesn't value 4-year degrees anymore. A 4-year cybersecurity degree is kind of a joke, because if you have to get accredited in order to deliver it, it takes 2 years to get accredited. Well, you understand what happens in a 2-year place in the cyber world. Thus, certifications are going to start trumping degrees, which is going to devalue the value of those degrees. And people are going to place greater value on certification. I'll give you one small example. I'm standing up a certification starting in January. It's a 1-year certification. You will come on site. You will take 15 hours of classroom training in the spring, do a full paid internship in the summer, 15 classroom hours in the fall. But these are not taught by accredited faculty. They're going to be taught by the head of Cisco, the head of Juniper, the head of Oracle, who may be teaching you on cyber stuff. We'll have a ethics class taught by Deloitte. So these are going to be these are classes there. But you're also required in the spring and fall to work 20 hours in our cybersecurity center. And upon graduation of this 1-year program, which will give you a certification, you'll have 1 year of hands-on experience working in a cybersecurity center. You will have taken 30 hours of relevant instruction led by industry experts, and I will ensure that my graduates have between 6 and 8 cybersecurity certifications that they will have completed. 100% of those employees after 1 year, whether they're high school, 2-year associate degree, or 4-year undergraduate degree, can start anywhere from $65,000 to $85,000, and I'll be able to get every single one of them hired before they even finish that 1-year certification. That's more valuable in the marketplace, as an example, than a 4-year degree. The result is we are going to have to pivot in higher ed to support industry partnerships with certifications in this technology world, and we're embracing it and we'll run towards it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your taking this time, and I hope you got something from each other. A lot of fun for me, and hope we get a chance to do it again soon.
Thank you. It was very informative. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you, Mark. See you again, Ghalib.
Guys.
Bye-bye.